Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Duet Reviews. My name is Jillian Robinson. I am the Associate Artistic Producer here at Cup of Hemlock, and I'm joined by the fabulous Ryan Borochovitz, one of our co-artistic producers. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I'm doing all right. How are you, Jill?
I'm doing okay, yes. A little emotionally vulnerable right now, but we'll get into that because today Ryan and I are unpacking the English language premiere of Lesson in Forgetting by playwright Emma Haché, put on by PleiadesTheatre, performed at the Young Center for Performing Arts. It was directed by Ash Knight, and it starred Reese Cowley, Andrew Moodie, and Dionisio. And it's been running throughout May, and we, at the time this recording is out, you have 2 more days to catch it. It runs till May 22, 2022. And folks, you are going to want to see this piece. But before we dive too far in, let's go through our usual intros. So Ryan, what is in your cup today, friend?
Well, it's kind of boring, but I've got water in my cup. But it is in my Cup of Hemlock cup. How about
Amazing.
You? What's in yours?
Well, good minds say minds think alike. I have water in the cup as well. I'm feeling a bit emotionally dehydrated right now, so water, and backup water is on the menu for tonight. So let's dig in. Ryan, do you want to take us through the usual ropes of giving us a little bit of a synopsis about this piece that we witnessed?
Yeah, so I guess just for the sake of anyone who's on the fence about whether or not they're going to see this production, again, we do highly recommend it, but we'll start with a brief non-spoilery discussion before we get into a no-holds-bars, anything-goes type spoiler discussion. There isn't really a lot to spoil, I will preface this by saying, but there are some things that maybe are worth experiencing in the moment without knowing, so we'll try to refrain from those until we put up some kind of visually interesting or spoiler shields, which people listening as a podcast will not know anything about. But yeah, Lesson in Forgetting, it's a very interesting piece. We have 3 characters on stage. The man is referred to in the program as him or he, I believe it was.
He.
Yeah, he and she are the 2 kind of main characters, and then we have a third that's the narrator. And he and she are in a relationship. It takes a little while to kind of completely understand where they're coming from, what the relationship is. We sort of start with a very kind of poetic, verbal piece that doesn't necessarily anchor you in exactly what the story is. It, to my mind, recalls the film Hiroshima Mon Amour, if that's a reference point that helps people kind of know what they're getting into. And then as we kind of unfold, we see that he has been in an accident, and his wife, she is visiting him in what seems to be some kind of hospital or rehabilitative facility and trying to help him kind of regain his memory through various exercises. And unfortunately, he has this type of short-term memory loss amnesia where he kind of keeps reverting back to the moment of the accident and doesn't seem able to retain anything after that. Mm-hmm. And it's a very sad, heart-wrenching, heartbreaking piece of the almost Sisyphean frustration of having this person you love so much not being able to remember who you are, not necessarily being the person they once were, not remembering who that person even is, and trying to grasp at the fragments of this relationship. Mm-hmm. How's that for a non-spoiler?
Yeah, I think, that's beautifully articulate. As mentioned before, we are fresh off seeing the show while doing this recording. So yeah, lots of emotions were flowing in me, and I literally could not have articulated it. So yes, I think that was a beautiful synopsis unpacking for sure. But yeah, I think you what you stated, Ryan, we might be able to put the spoiler shroud up now. I think I'll call it a shroud because our narrator had this beautiful shroud sash that was used several different ways, which maybe that's a tiny spoiler, but just so that we are telling our listeners or viewers that is what the symbol is for this episode, I think.
We are putting up the spoiler shroud, so if you want to see it, So if you do want to see the show, yes, by all means, you have 2 more days if you're watching this when it goes up, or listening to this when it goes up. We highly recommend. And then come back and then tune into the rest. We hope you'll rejoin us.
Yeah, and just before we put up that shroud, to add to that, this piece, I've said it so many times already, it accessed my emotions in a way that has not necessarily been tapped in a live performance, coming back to live performance post-pandemic. So, yeah. So I'll just leave that little token of information. And
now, the shroud.
The shroud is up. Okay.
Okay, so what do you want to talk about first? So I think before we actually get into it, you obviously had a much more profound emotional experience with this piece than I did. I thought it was great and brilliant, well performed, well written, well designed across the board. Very strong endorsement for this piece, but you were sobbing, and I was not. So I want to kind of I know you were hosting this episode a moment ago, but I do want to start by kind of turning to you. What was it about it that really kind of accessed your emotions this way?
So I consider myself an empath. So just to kind of to share that with our viewers and listeners, I experience emotion on a very deep, visceral level. I experience other people's emotions through a space on an odd level at times as well. And as I said before, this piece to me emotionally touched me in such a thematic way, as well as an artistic way, as well as my empath brain was also on my aching for how the actors had to perform. So there was so many levels of emotion that was accessed for me. Again, I think speaking as the human, the literal relationship between this couple who are potentially middle-aged to older. I obviously haven't witnessed that myself, but sort of the embodiment of what is it like to be a caretaker for someone. What is it like to, a drastic change happens in a loved one's life, right? Whether it be a physical accident or a cognitive accident. How does that shift your life as the caretaker? How does that shift your life as the person who is kind of a supporting role in that person's life? So that was kind of just flowing through. Again, I literally have not had a partner get amnesia by a car accident our character experiences, but I have lost my grandparents. I have seen my parents struggle through my grandparents losing their memory. I think we could even talk about if you have someone close to you who is going through some mental health issues or mental health bumps in the road, and stepping into the position of support for that person, or seeing episodes kind of flow back and forth with that. So there was just so many emotional windows, I guess, that were blasted open, and the shutters were flapping for me. And that's the beauty, the core of this piece is, sure, there was this literal relationship that we were seeing, and as Ryan was mentioning too, the pattern of her coming back to visit him, there was a lot of repetition in the piece. Don't even get me started on repetition. Repetition just tugs the heartstrings even more. But then having the narrator character there to kind of remind us that this is a story, but also to weave all of the in-between moments. So this is this is really hard for you to unpack. But so that segues to another level that was kind of accessed of, regardless of memory loss, regardless of sickness. I think as humans, and this is another reason why I say art is such an access point for depth of emotion and depth of self. I think there is the in-between moments of life that we neglect, and not purposefully, but just the humdrum of everyday life in society we forget the little moments. And something that Reese Cowley, who played our narrator, I think was really integral to weave that reminder. Like that as the audience was our lesson, kind of, because she was the one that brought in a lot of the physical and the visual. She was either conducting the visual representation of self, or she was speaking it or embodying it. And it, to me, it was just like all of the gray space is the in-between moments of when our character, he had an episode or an attack, and it was very like high tension on stage. And then in the snap of a finger, there was laughter. There was childlike. There was something to the narrator being present. It was like, whoa, we weren't just watching this like couple and how do they navigate their new sort of parameters of relationship. It was like, oh my God, this is just like an episode of life, or an episode of what it is to be human, or an episode of relationship. I think to even unpack that even further, like there was dance, there was movement, there was sculpture. So it was also like art was embodied in so many different ways, in all of its many facets in this piece for me. It was physical representation through different genres of physicality. It was represented through monologue as well as through dialogue. It was represented through prose as well as through poetry. It was represented through music, and music as like scored music and also ambient music. So there was no space to not connect to something. I'm not saying you necessarily had to be connected to the whole piece. I think that's another reason why I was just going through these roller coasters of sob and laugh and sob and laugh and still and sob and laugh and still. Literally my mask was like covered in snot and tears at the end, because it was just, there was always something. And I think another beautiful thing about this piece is I know that not a single person in this audience is going to have the same reaction. And that's another beautiful thing that it offered, I think, because maybe someone could, but I don't. I think this piece does what I'm about to say, like it does this on purpose, is there's really no like finite beginning, middle, end. There's moments where you kind of do get, like Ryan was saying, like you don't necessarily know the intricacies of the relationship. You kind of have to you're forced to go on that journey with them. And what do we like to do as humans? We like to make sense of things, right? So it's also forcing you to be on, right? If you're in a moment of unknownness or you don't have like a structured map in front of you, as humans, our biological response is, okay, well, I need some answers, right? So I'm forced to listen to what the narrator is saying, or I'm forced to kind of look at the gesture that he or the character, she is doing, and why are they doing that? And then I caught myself in those moments laughing, or in those moments crying. And, and I think also just on another layer with memory loss, the idea, like Ryan was saying, to the characters go through exercises to stimulate his brain, right? And there's pictures, which we can unpack to like the visual elements of this, which I'll volley back to Ryan because I'm talking a lot. But there was picture quizzes on like how to trigger the neurons in your brain. There was music. Music is definitely used to recall cognition, and so I think there was like a scientific level that I was like gelling with as well. And again, it literally using instruments to stimulate the psyche, and watching that, like your psyche is going to be stimulated. So it's like, there was so many layers to what I was seeing, and it was just hitting me literally like a ripple. And it's so interesting. And now that I'm saying this out loud, there was a visual of when our character, he is trying to unpack this nothingness, or, he describes it as being like a gray desert But then on the white squared panels that are kind of placed around the theater, you're seeing it as like a reservoir of water. And it's like this ripply, so dark, it's just
murky depths.
Dark, murky, yeah. So it's just, and I knew too after like the first 5 minutes of like, oh my gosh, Ryan and I are gonna, like, there's no, we could talk about this piece till the cows come home. And we don't have any cows. So, but, anyways, I don't know if that answered what you were trying to get me to say. Again, viewers and listeners, but I apologize if this is just a hot, emotional oatmeal lump coming out of my mouth for this review, because it definitely connected to me in a beautiful but a very deep way. But that was me. What was your experience like?
Well, yeah, like, first of all, I'll say there's nothing specific I was trying to get you to say. I just wanted you to share your feelings about it, and clearly that's what you're doing. And even if, it is very raw and emotional, and you're not entirely able to even anchor in precisely what it is about that, like, I think your little monologue that you just shared here is probably the best way to articulate how you're feeling.
The episode,
but you're speaking from your heart. You're kind of living in the piece, and I think that's the best way to engage with it. Like, I will say, like, I thought it was great on all counts. All three of our performers were just like top-notch, excellent work. Like, the script is very tight, beautifully crafted, and all the production elements from like the set, the music, the projection, blocking, the movement pieces, a tiny detail that I loved and was like so kind of unimportant in the grand scheme of it is every time that she cued music to turn on or off, she did it like a conductor, which kind of just like was a very beautiful way. And then there's this sort of subtext throughout about he possibly being a master cellist in his life prior to, and that the kind of loss of this music being this other element of it's not just who you are as a person and the specific things you remember in this relationship, but just that there's this entire history, this autobiography, a backstory of this individual is just completely gone. And like on all counts, it was stunning piece. And I kind of wonder, why did I not engage with it? Like, did it not necessarily, as much as I enjoyed it, it didn't tug on my heartstrings the same way that you did. And like certain pieces do, certain pieces don't, and I think that's okay. But I can even think of like a very specific recent life experience I had that should make this resonate in like a very profound way, because you know this very well, but to our viewers or listeners who don't, like at the beginning of the pandemic, my grandmother came to live with me. I was still living with my parents at the time, and my grandmother, Bubby, as we called her, came to live with us because, she didn't have any place to be where she wouldn't be isolated, and she had dementia and was very similar to the situation that we see he being here, where things would not last or be retained in her brain for like more than 2-3 minutes at a time. He had very great long-term memory, but it was an inability to retain. And for the first several months of her being there, she had no idea why she was even living with us or what was going on. The pandemic meant nothing to her. And and it is frustrating. Like, as much as you love this other person and you want to be there, like there is this, like, I used the term Sisyphean before. Watching this play feels like an absurdist play, even though it's like a very kind of like grounded, real situation of just the constant repetition. And the one repetitious part in particular, when the moment when he kind of resets and like he doesn't even remember why he's in this facility and what happened, and she says, well, you had an accident, you don't remember, and then he goes back, oh, were you okay? And it's always the same lines. And what I kind of love about this is, as frustrated as she clearly is, she doesn't show it to him. There is one outburst moment that near the end that we can talk about in a bit, but that's something that you had to learn. Like, I learned, and my parents and I learned dealing with Bubby in this way, that it's easy to just say you're here because you're alone and the pandemic, and we didn't want you to be isolated, and and then you get asked the same question again and you get increasingly frustrated. But the thing you have to remember for yourself is that, well, if she's asking, that's because she doesn't remember. So saying, I told you, don't you remember, does nothing, even if that's how it feels to you, because you have the luxury of remembering that you just said this.
Yeah.
So, I thought there was something very, honest in how unfrustrated she was presenting, even if under the surface you could tell that clearly this must be frustrating for her.
Yeah.
Sorry, you want to jump in on that?
No, I just had a light bulb switch on of, again, we're just going to weave down the many paths of just what comes up talking about this piece. I think the set really complements what you're saying, because there was a patch of square light, or a white. Basically, it was an alleyway setup, right? So meaning the play was played across two audiences flanking sides of the stage. For folks listening or seeing and don't know what an alley stage is, and so the actor sort of plays to both sides of the stage. And that was probably not how I just broke that down, but and so it was the curtains on the side were black, the stage was black, but there were white squares. So when I say white squares, on two sides of the space there are three white squares, kind of almost like a staircase set up. And then you had a white square center stage that was either paint or light. Because I know it was light, but I don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
it was painted because the lights changed throughout. That square never changed. So.
And then there were platforms on stage, several platforms that were either rectangular or square, and either stacked. And there were some drama boxes as well that were cubes. So basically, the play space was a rectangle, and the set pieces in the rectangles were either rectangles or squares. So really, to me, what you just said is there's so much with that, trapped in a box, trapped in a butt. A lot of the characters weave and move fluidly around these very rigid structures, and even circular movements. When there's frustration, I know several times the character he just kind of would go in circles. And I noticed too, because my eyes were so we're looking at structured spaces, I really tapped into when the actor's physicality was rounded or was different than structured too. So with that, I mean the hugging moments, the embraces, when there is frustration, the emotion going down. So that, again, I'm kind of spiraling on what you said, but to me, it's almost like she's trapped. I mean, both of them are trapped, right? He absolutely is trapped within his own non-thoughts, basically, and she's trapped in the situation of, because it even says in the program too, she wants him to forget him so that she can go and live a life, which she ends up doing, but then comes back. And now I kind of want to throw to you the theme of love in this piece, Brian. I'm just gonna. What do you think about it? What do you think what's the part that it plays?
Yeah, I think
it's a loaded question.
But I think love is the anchor. From point A to point B, that is it is the reason why she keeps coming back. When she says very early on that, if I just stopped coming, you would not remember. You wouldn't know that I was supposed to be coming. I wouldn't be here to even explain to you that you had an accident and that you can't remember. So, right off the bat, we established the fact that it is this love and this maybe motivated partly by a hope for rehabilitation, but it is her love for him that is keeping her coming through this very admittedly frustrating situation. And what's interesting from his perspective is that it is his love for her is the one thing that he does remember, that no matter what happens, he cannot forget that he is in love with her. And then this might be a slight detour from your question, and we'll come back to it, but there's one thing in particular that I'm glad we did put up a spoiler shroud, because there's one line in particular that really stood out to me. And it was in one of the many times when he asked, "Oh my God, what happened? Were you all right?" The car accident. And she says, and is never addressed again, but she says, "Yes, I wasn't in the car with you. The woman who was sitting next to you died instantly, but I wasn't there." And I have thoughts about this line, because it made me think of something. I don't know if this is textually the case, but I feel like there's one or two ways we could interpret this moment. Is that either, one, he was having an affair or cheating on her, and so that's who this other woman who died instantly in the crash, who just happened to be. The other one, and I think I like this one more, I don't know if it is the case, and maybe you can think of other possibilities that you can add.
I already have a couple in there, yeah.
Well, I'll say my other one, is that they were already broken up, he and she. Is like maybe that this relationship had already ended prior to his accident, and there are other things that we could talk about of what might have been the cause of that possible rupture, but that he had, they'd been divorced and he moved on with his life. There was another woman, maybe even another wife or partner next to him in the car. She dies instantly, and then this is an opportunity for a new beginning for he and she who is still in love with him, regardless of their history, and the fact that he's maybe even turned back into this blank slate, can be seen as an opportunity to start fresh. And the love that is motivating her to come also comes with this caveat of, okay, we have a new beginning, but there's a lot of work and thankless work that may never promise positive results. But we get to be together. I don't know, what were your theories about?
So I just thought of, I get in the text, she literally says, "I wasn't the one in the car with you," or like that it was another woman, or the woman in the car. I can't remember the exact words. But what if it was her? And the character that we're seeing, the character of she, is this memory. This is this memory of she that he has. Because now that I'm thinking of when she leaves to go, and there's a statement that she says, like, "I have to go now, I'll see you tomorrow." And she goes into like a white shroud. It's backstage, but like what we see as the audience is she just goes into this white abyss. And he is left on the stage. And that's the moment where he literally turns to the audience and is like, I'm seeing nothingness. I see blah, 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 blah. And then there's a moment when there was a moment of the text when he said, "No one has come to visit me in the past 20 years. And is that him being...
I don't recall if he said that, or was that her?
Yeah, no, that was him. That was him. He muddled it under his breath. So I'm like, maybe she died. And what we're seeing is he only being able to remember her. And it's the memory of her that is like bound to him and wants to go. I don't know. That's like a very artistic unpacking. And like, there might be moments in, again, my brain and heart were on like an emotional roller coaster. And I like had my eyes closed some probably moments. So like, maybe there is something literally in the text that totally goes against what I just unpacked. But because we don't know it, because it's a very like dreamlike. Because another thing that's backing this up too is our narrator's costume is all in white, right? Which makes her basically blend into the setting. She is a blank canvas. She's kind of just a guide for us, the audience. And so, you know, it is kind of very dreamlike.
See,
are we just in his mind the whole time?
If I could jump in, like, it's interesting because that hadn't occurred to me at all, that this whole thing could be happening in his mind, and I like that as an interpretation. And I would kind of want to rewatch the play with that lens in mind and see, like, how does it work? Does it work? Does this theory kind of hold up to scrutiny? And like, you know, it's very like Alan, I think to me, I would like to think, just from a playwriting dramaturgy perspective, that if that was the case, I would have liked a more kind of, not necessarily definitive, but more concrete, detectable evidence of that, aside from the kind of hunch of like what you detected from a line that you said was muttered under breath. Like, I feel like if that is in a way the answer or a possible answer, I would have liked to see more gestures in that direction, but maybe rewatching it through that lens would actually give credence to that.
But I think that's another beauty. Sorry, go ahead.
No, like, and all I was going to say is, like, both of my two theories, either the kind of George Clooney Descendants version of this, where, like, you were cheating on me, but now you've been in this terrible accident and I have to forgive you while being mad at you because you're in this situation, which, you know, also beautiful film, The Descendants, and I kind of think, like, if we're looking at more frames of reference, like, that's like also pretty, like, an interesting take all on its own. And then the one of my two theories that I like even more is the other one that I was describing, of this relationship ended years ago, but now we have a new start, but a very difficult one, and to me, that just dials the love up to the wedding.
I don't think it's the latter, and the reason why is I think the in-between moments of, like, movement and, like, bringing in the seasons, like we've talked about how there's no necessarily beginning, middle, and end of this piece, but there's definitely, like, the repetition of she coming to visit he, and them recounting that, like, there is some sort of chronology of, like, this is a relationship that they're visiting, but in between that, there's like an analysis of human life and human self, and I think it's said in such a beautiful, poetic way, like vocally, and also demonstrated physically, that love is the only way that those visuals and auditory responses can be comprehended or even molded, if that makes sense.
Like, to me, I don't feel like they're mutually exclusive. Love and the interpretation I put forward, it is precisely because of love that she would, like, and I'm not saying this is the correct answer or even a correct answer, like, I just think.
But I think there's so much pain of her coming back and her not wanting to leave. I think I'm not saying, like, what they had before this potential affair relationship or whatever, or new relationship that you're maybe proposing, but there's just, like, a true, like, this sounds cliche, but, like, a true deep love that is there, that I feel like it was like an old timey, it almost is like Ellie and Carl and Up. Like, there was
which
that
is a movie that makes me sob, I will say.
There you go. But there was that. Like, that I think, that's another, I've sobbed in that movie too. I mean, like, who doesn't? But, so I don't know. I would like, at least the she and he that I saw, I would like to say that their backstory was, they were, like, so in love and like ready to start a family or ready to do what have you, and so connected, and then this change, this life-altering change goes in.
Well, on the subject of starting a family, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's another one of the big, potentially spoily things that I really want to talk about in this spoiler shroud zone. Because there's something that you might call a plot twist, in a way, that I think deserves unpacking. And that is, it's one of the functions of the narrator. I wouldn't say it's the function or what the narrator is, but we are presented with a situation where, and I'll kind of walk through how we, like, learn this information, but in the play, she tells he very early on that they have a daughter, Adele, her name is, and the narrator kind of takes on the posture of Adele, who we're told is a dancer, and we sort of, you know, right off the bat, me and the audience is thinking, like, oh, that's who the narrator is. The narrator is their daughter.
Sorry, Adele was not the dancer. Adele was in school, in university, 4 hours away.
Okay, I thought it was also a dancer.
No? Wish?
I thought, so I could be wrong. Doesn't really make much of a difference, but to the point I'm making here. Then, yes, and then a few scenes later, once again, like, we're dealing with this memory zone where he doesn't retain anything, so she also tells he, in this instance, we have a daughter named Alice. And once again, the narrator takes on the posture, but we, the audience, because we have the benefit of remembering the previous scene, a luxury that he does not have, we realize, wait, that's not the name from before, and we're told that Alice is a dancer, which in my mind, perhaps my memory is betraying me. Hey,
no, maybe I didn't pick up that Adele was a dancer, because I was
Adele
thinking
was
that
100% in
Adele
school.
and Alice were just two of their kids.
Right. So what I thought was interesting, and this is why partly, hey, Emma Haché, if you want to get into the comments and correct this for us, that would be lovely. We are presented with these two different names for the concept of a daughter, and some of the biographical details of this daughter may or may not have been the same in each iteration, but right off the bat, we, the audience, are kind of presented with, oh wait, is this a different daughter? Is it the same daughter? Is she just screwing with his brain? And as the plot unfolds, it is revealed in quite, I think, explicit terms that we are dealing with a Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf kind of situation. Spoilers for that play. Sorry, do you want to say something?
She mentions that she has two miscarriages.
Yes.
Adele and Alice.
Okay,
sorry.
Okay. Sorry, you're just putting the pieces together now. Yes. So it is said in pretty explicit terms that... Well,
I knew she had a miscarriage, sorry, but the fact that Alice and Adele...
Yeah. That they never had a child is... Yeah. Where I'm going is they never had a child, and the term two miscarriages is used. So what we, the audience, are kind of able to piece together that he is not, he, the character, to use your phraseology, is that... This was clearly a strain on their relationship. She had these two miscarriages. They were not able to procreate. And in a way, again, I use Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf as, I think, a pretty clear frame of reference here. Again, there's so much intertextuality, I think, in this piece, is that, again, this kind of goes back to the idea I was saying about the possible blank slate of maybe the relationship is being restarted in this post-amnesia situation, but she is using the fact that he does not know as an opportunity to play out this fantasy of a successful child, and this kind of successful nuclear family unit that they never were able to have. And hey, if we want to compare it to Up again, that was also a plot point in there in the, very sad montage where we are informed that they were not able to have child. Again, don't need to keep drawing that comparison, but I think it's very interesting psychologically that we, in the first scene, just dramaturgically, is very well paced, and just the way this information is revealed, is that first we think, oh, of course they have a daughter, and isn't it sad that he doesn't remember her? And then we're like, wait, do they have two daughters? Is she just messing with him? And then we eventually find out the tragic news of, oh, they couldn't, and this is just as much her processing this trauma as it is him processing the literal, head-force trauma of his, missing gray matter. And I don't know if you have more thoughts about this, but yes.
Well, and also we get a tiny, tiny episode. Tiny as in a short chunk of the piece, but the largest, visceral, loudest moment of the piece is when she, in my opinion, is at her most vulnerable and her most depth when she recounts the abuse she received from her mother as a kid. And we're sort of have a peek into behind the curtain of, to me, it seemed like her mother had, was ill or had some mental health, disparities. I don't really know if I can confidently say what was going on there. Instantly started sobbing, though, at Reese Cowley's guttural scream as the mother in that moment. I just need to, as an actor and an audience member, tip my hat, bow down to you, because screaming that scream on stage is, talk about emotional level, and having to do that as a performer. Yeah. Performer in me was like, oh my goodness. Anyways, so we get, he has the literal trauma and the memory loss that she is the support system for. But as the story unfolds, she starts to unfold, and we see that she has baggage of her own too, like of her emotional cognitive abuse that she received as a small child. She was 6 when this episode is recounted, where the mother has an outburst, yet that the night of that outburst, they spend the night together cuddled in bed. So it was kind of just like a snapshot of like, whoa, there is this unhealthy, ricocheted, like slingshot relationship between mother and daughter.
Nest of emotional traumas and triggers.
And like, she's 6. She's 6. And developmental psychology, like that age group, like that will sit with you into adulthood. And then you hear, as the story again unfolds, you hear about these 2 miscarriages that her body has gone through. Their relationship has gone through, but her physical and mental cognitive self has gone through as well. Yet she is still this returning pillar of memory and strength and normalcy for he. So again, this is like, I'm going on a little tangent again, but like this is why it's like interwoven, like humanity just kind of coming and ebbing and flowing, because it's like literally 2 ships passing and colliding and crashing and rebuilding in the night. Like that to me was what we were seeing. And it wasn't until the back half of the piece for me, like I said, when she, the character of she, starts to unravel, that you're kind of brought into like this like cyclical thing of, what do we go through as individuals? What do we go through as individuals in relationships? What do relationships go through? What do like relationships that didn't occur, but like fantastical relationships, how do they manifest? How do they manifest in someone who does have cognitive awareness? How do they manifest in someone who doesn't? And can, like, there's just, sorry, I went on a little journey there.
Keep going, journey it out.
I think one thing I do want to talk about is the tie, the necktie. So in the little, Ryan kind of made a really good comment of how there's like absurdist moments of this piece, or this piece kind of seems absurdist in some elements, in some moments. And I think it's like literally absurd. Like you see there's like physical comedy or like laughter that especially Andrew Moodie uses a lot, but then absurd in the sense of like, again, Ryan unpacked of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. There's like this like shallow quell of a scene going on, but like a baked like underbelly of darkness and depth and like subtext kind of going on. And so this element of there's like a necktie, because here's another thing, again, the piece is like, the set is so scaled, there's only 3 people on stage always. So again, like I said before, my brain was trying to like, when I was completely not really maybe knowing what the story was saying, I was trying to sink my teeth or my brain into other things I saw on stage, right? So in a piece like this, where it's not a lot of people on stage and a scaled down set, obviously costume elements that are used or props that are brought on stage, those are indicators, those are symbols that I want to kind of relate to or unpack. So there's the idea of the necktie. And to me, that was just like, it was, in my opinion, first of all, we get a blue necktie or like a steel gray necktie, which matches his costume, which is blue, like a grayed cardigan, blends right in. And we have her tie it on him, which that's a very intimate moment. And we can unpack Intimacy by Siobhan Richardson in this piece was absolutely stunning. And again, layers and layers and layers. That could be a whole nother episode. Stunning.
We see you, Siobhan. We see you. Good work.
We always see you, Siobhan. Siobhan, we love Siobhan. But so it was a blue, and then so our character of she was wearing all red. And at the end of the piece, after she's gone away and she's left because she's made the decision to leave and he has given her permission to go, she comes back after a certain amount of time and brings him a gift or like and it's a red necktie now. And to me, that was stunning to see because she was the one in red it was a piece of her. And to me, there was so much to unpack symbolically there too, of like, she got some of her own self back. But then it's so cute. She gives it to him and he says like, oh, it's a chicken. And it kind of goes back to those exercise patterns that they were trying to do of like, what's the image you see? It was a train. He said it was a chicken. It was,
tree. It's a chicken.
Tree. It was a chicken.
Is it the Queen Elizabeth? That one he gets.
Queen Elizabeth, he always knew.
Queen Elizabeth.
But so she gets so angry when he doesn't say this is a necktie to begin with, it's a chicken, and she like throws it at him, and it became like this weapon and whips him. Yeah, and then it was red, and it was like, started to again suss up like, what does it mean for it to be red? Like it's love. They're tethered together. They're like, there were so many things happening there. And then what do you know? He kind of comes out of an episode, picks it up. And she's like, well, it's your chicken. It's the chicken I got you. And he's like, this is a necktie. And it was like he was holding what she wanted him to hold finally in his hand. And the fact that it was a piece of red, like, again, I could have a whole nother unpacking of this scene tomorrow. Like this piece is brilliant.
I wanted to talk about the scene too, because to me it plays into something very interesting that it's a big one, but there's an Ovidian kind of undercurrent in this piece that I think should be addressed, in that when we're talking about Alice, their daughter, who's a dancer, and they recount and reenact on stage the ballet piece that she's in, it's Pygmalion and Galatea is the piece, and we learn about the sculptor who falls in love with his creation, and that's the piece. And then the creation, once she comes to life, kills the sculptor. And I couldn't help in my head connecting this necktie image that kind of goes throughout the piece with this, because on one hand, like, the very first mention of a necktie in the piece is him mentioning, just in some of their early exercises, their lessons, that a large percentage of people, I don't remember the exact line, die as a result of neckties every year. And some of them, possibly self-inflicted, others getting by others, but like, yes, this device that, is so benign and we wear all the time could be a deadly weapon for either self-inflicted or homicidal action. Yeah. And then this fun anecdote is immediately followed by, oh, here's a necktie, I'm going to put it on. And she puts it on for him. Mm-hmm. And he's wearing it for many of the subsequent scenes. And it kind of has this almost talismanic, noose-like quality just based on the context in which it's brought up. And then, time goes on and we have this whole Galatea interlude. And, on one hand, I like to see that the daughter, is this construction of marble, this structure. It's something that never really existed, but through the act of artifice and storytelling, she creates this thing that, to me, thematically doesn't necessarily pay off. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing. I'm like, because there is no moment, at least as far as my analysis goes, where the creation of this piece comes back to destroy the creator. Mm-hmm. But where we come back to the necktie, and why I bring it up in this context, is that we do have an act of violence with the necktie very close to the end, this whipping, this physical action. Oh. And, like, I wonder who is Pygmalion and who is Galatea in this situation? Who is the creator in the creation? Instead of the finality of death that like this moment has, it is essentially what breaks the seal, and it jogs a memory, and he remembers this is a necktie after we have this. Mm-hmm. He's like broken, and he's like, please stop, you're like, what are you doing? But it is this kind of crucible that they come out better on the other side of it. I don't know. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. I don't know if you have thoughts, you.
No, I'm going to take us outside of this for a second, because I think you just tapped in, and what has been tapped in throughout this whole thing is I'm going to take us outside of the piece. And I think what you're saying too, and what I kind of alluded to in my hot oatmeal unpacked stew of emotion earlier, is this piece, it puts the realm of what we know as at least Western art in a blender. Because what you just unpacked too, you just used so many references to like the origins of theater. You mentioned Pygmalion. I've read somewhere, I'm pretty sure it's in the program or somewhere in one of the write-ups of how the prose and poetry in this is like Shakespeare, Ibsen, Chekhov tosses them kind of all together. The idea that one of the daughters' names is Alice, and I think I'm confident to say anytime we hear the word Alice or the name Alice in literature, we think of Alice in Wonderland, which exactly through the rabbit hole. And so the fact that you're struggling with like, I don't know who is who, I think there's a whole other essay to unpack of what this piece does to art, how it represents art. And it literally to me is like every single thing we know of to be art, whether it be visually movement-esque, sculpture, acting, like I said, monologue, dialogue, musicality, is thrown into this blender. And it's unconceivable by the human brain. It's why we cannot articulate exactly how to pinpoint this piece, because I think it's inarticulate, because it's like it's using every crevice of art. And we know that visual art inspires performative art, or performative art involves, visual art, or vice versa, and music and sculpture and we can get into the different tendrils of what is art, what makes art art. But when it's all at play together and it's all revolving in a space that is pretty much empty for it to just have its playground, it's inconceivable. Like it's, look at that. I'm like, Freud has gotten in and I've been like, okay, give me a Princess Bride quickly.
But it's like I think you're absolutely right. Like, because like Edward Gordon Craig said that the art of the theater is the synthesis of all other arts, that it's not just acting and it's not just painting and it's not just dance, it's not just music, it's putting it all together is the theatrical event. So your blender full of oatmeal about the entire history of art, and you take, Ovid responding to mythology, but then inspiring Shakespeare, and then inspiring all this Renaissance painting, and constantly inspiring Mary Zimmerman to write her post 9/11 Ovid, and now inspiring this piece. Like, I think, yes, there is 100% a lineage, tradition, an intertextual network that this piece not only utilizes, but explodes into just the piece that we saw. And that is probably why, as you said, like, it is just so hard to pinpoint exactly what it means, and for the better.
Yeah, and I think also going, I would be interested, like an audience member who is not someone like Ryan, you and I are in the arts industry in some shape or form. And I would be interested to hear like an audience member who is not an artist or in the arts industry by trade, who, maybe an engineer coming to see the show, or like a nurse coming to see the show, and what their experience, because I do think there is an element of humanity, like literally art and humanities is a whole strain of thought. But that I think everybody can tap into, but I think a layer that is worth mentioning, and especially for listeners, viewers who are artists as well, like there's, again, I think this kind of talks back to like, not only was emotionally, thematically as a person I was relating, but as an artist I was relating and trying to unpack. And like even the use of like leaves and water, like that's so Chekhovian, right? Like it's like, oh, I'm feeling, I'm being, triggered by Chekhov's vibes here, or like, hearing the poetry and maybe not being able to unpack it fully, but getting the outskirts of what's going on. That to me is very like Shakespearean, Jacobean, right? It's like there, and then like add in musicality and add in just movement and add in tableau, right? And
the one last thing that I would maybe even want to add to that, and we are coming up on an hour, so we should probably wrap. We could keep talking about this forever, but that it's another thought that, in terms of this absurdity that I brought up a moment ago, or well, at the very beginning, but we've come back to it a few times, is that the idea of memory loss, as it is represented in this play, or as it is represented in the Adam Sandler movie 50 First Dates, or in the film Memento, or take your pick. There's a lot of, or Finding Dory for that matter, to use another Pixar reference. The frustration of constantly going back to saying this again, having to say it again, because I'm in a place, I being he in this case, where I don't remember saying this before, I have to go back to square one. That's theater. That is like, and I mean, like, as in, you know this better than anyone, as an actor, that you are repeating the same lines over and over again. We see so much repetition in this piece, but like the ultimate kind of quintessence of the art of theater that I think we're seeing here is, well, I don't want to say that it is repetition, because like there's, Peter Brook says in The Empty Space that the French word for rehearsal is repetition, and there's nothing more deadly to art than that idea that rehearsals are just constantly repeating, because you've got to keep it fresh, keep it alive, always change something. And, we could talk so much about this idea of, repetition with variation, or rep and rev, to use like a term from jazz aesthetics, something that Susan Murray Parks talks about a lot, or Henry Louis Gates for that matter. But like, we could talk about how at the end of the day, once you do concretize the piece of theater as this living thing, there is still this stability in the structure, the script of the repetition. And, having to be the characters in that moment and relive it over and over again, night after night, especially when you're in something traumatic or playing you talked about how emotionally strenuous this must have been for the actors to just do this and like kind of access this work, that this piece, I think, literalizes that. Like, 100% I agree that an engineer or someone with no relationship to the arts can enjoy and find something meaningful in this piece, but there is that extra layer of, this, I think, is an artist's play or an actor's play or a play for the artist within us all, perhaps.
That's probably why I was like sobbing at the end, and then looked at Ryan and started laughing, because it was just like, oh, great, intense emotions that are like firing on all cylinders. I think we found a heartbeat, at least our heartbeat, to what this piece could be.
And the beauty is that anyone else could find anything else in it.
Absolutely.
And get down in the comments and share your own blunderful of oatmeal. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, blunderful of oatmeal. I think that's maybe where we leave it.
Yeah.
Just revolving around like fallen leaves in a wistful wind. All of our thoughts.
Behind the shroud of memory.
Behind the shroud of memory.
Chickens and neckties and Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, just dropping that right in there.
Why not?
Yeah, so again, if you've made it this far on our Alice in Wonderland down the rabbit hole journey of unpacking, lesson, and forgetting, again, this is such a stunning piece. Obviously, no lack of things to talk about and to unpack. I would love to see it multiple times. I think I would feel different moments differently, and depending on how I was feeling going into the space too and leaving. Yeah, just stunning work. Again, it was the English language premiere by their playwright Emma Haché, and directed by Ash Knight, starring Reese Cowley, and Dionisio, and Andrew Moodie, put on by PleiadesTheatre, and it is playing now at the Young Center for Performing Arts until May 22nd, 2022. So if you're listening to this on Friday, get your tickets for the weekend. You will not regret it. It's definitely not one to be missed. Yeah, I feel so grateful and honored that I was sharing the space with people in this piece. So that is where we will leave you. So to kind of cap off the episode, like usual, Ryan, where can folks find you, or where would you like to direct our viewers, listeners?
No, there's no reason for anyone to follow little me. Just maybe direct your attention to Cup of Hemlock Theatre at COH Theatre on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're watching this on YouTube, like, share, and subscribe. If you're listening to this as a podcast, people subscribe to podcasts, right? Do you like podcasts? Do you listen to podcasts? Just do whatever the calls to action
stars. Yeah.
How about you, Jillian Robinson? Where can people find you?
Yes, people can find me at my artist Instagram account, which is at Jillian.Robinson96. And currently, if you're listening, watching, I am starring as Rapunzel in Rapunzel, a family-friendly panto happening at Witchwood Theatre with TYT Theatre. Ryan is actually assistant stage managing for us, so that's lovely. And that'll be going up till June 5. And keep your eyes peeled to the Instagram page. I have a busy summer ahead of me of fun projects, and I will leave it with a clue of Fringe and Shakespeare, 2 different projects. I will announce those as the year goes on. You'll probably see on my page soon enough. But as always, too, yes, give all the love to Cup of Hemlock Theatre. Follow all of our pages, drop all the comments, subscriptions, like Ryan already said, and continue to stay safe out there, folks, physically, emotionally, and mentally. And thanks for tuning in to this episode. We will see you next time. Cheers.